Seeing if the mind is particularly interested in one thing and lingers there, or seems to go from thing to thing. Neither is right or wrong. Just let yourself be interested in whatever arises. Various sensations, the feel of breath, even allowing awareness to notice sound. Seeing if you can notice sound, just as something that awareness can acknowledge. You don't need to say truck or bird, just the sound. So we're noticing sounds and sensations and breath. All of them are happening all the time. The mind is curious and moves toward what it's curious about without holding on, without purposefully lingering or purposefully letting go, just being fluid, moving into experience. If you notice getting stuck in thought, you can let the thought go to come back to experience, hearing, breathing, feeling. So I'd like to open the floor for questions and comments, maybe sticking to what we've done so far.
I have two questions from the story you told last week about the woman that kept falling in the hole.
Yeah.
First question is, I'm assuming we all laugh because we assumed that the woman wasn't mentally defective and had some degree of awareness yet persisting. And if she persisted like that, but then became mindful and came up with alternatives, is the reason for the persistence, despite the, I guess, negative aspects of continuing, are the reasons important, or just the awareness that there's something amiss and needs to be corrected? That's my first question.
Let me see if I understand your question. You're saying the reasons why she continued to go down the same street.
A person's reason, like if we go beyond
continue
the
to do
metaphor
the same thing.
to
Right.
something, are the reasons for something important to find out? Is that the insight part of it, or just the change that this is? I need to make a change.
I would say that it could be either or both. That sometimes insight tells you the reason. In her case, the result told her the reason. She kept falling. So that was what told her, I need to do it a different way. So a lot of times what happens is that we go through our life with certain habit patterns. So let me just, for those of you who were not here last week, I'm going to summarize the story that he's talking about. It's called Autobiography in 5 chapters. A woman walks down the block. There's a hole in the street. She doesn't see it. She falls in. She freaks out. She can't get out. It's not her fault. She walks down the street again. There's a hole in the street. She sees it, but she falls in. She can't get out. It's not her fault. The next time she walks down the street, she sees it. She still falls in. And she gets out easily. And she realizes it's her fault. The 4th time she walks down the same street, there's a hole in the street, she sees it, she walks around it. The 5th time she walks down another street.
I heard that long ago, I remember.
Yeah. So the question is, you know, bringing it back to this practice, which is called insight meditation, the purpose of this practice is to examine your experience. We're doing it right now in a very particularized way through meditation, watching sensation, watching breath, hearing sound. That is preparing us for being mindful in the world. It's a very specific type of mindfulness, a microcosm that gets expanded out into the macrocosm through practice. So once you practice all this mindfulness, insight arises. Insight into the truth of the way things are. Insight into why we suffer. Insight into how we can be more happy. Insight into the fact that things are always changing and impermanent. The things that we need to know in order to live a more peaceful life. So the question is whether we need to understand the reasons, or is it just enough to have the insight? I think that's your question, yeah?
Is the change the most important thing, or the reasons that would take a person who should be able to see it? You know what I mean? With some degree of awareness.
Yeah.
To the reasons causing the block.
Right. You know, and I want to say, too, that, you know, I don't think this woman has any less awareness than any of us do. I mean, the reason why that's such a poignant story is because that really is the amount of awareness we have. We do things way more than 5 times before we get it. You know? And so I think she's doing a great job. But to answer your question, you know, I think that the change is the most important thing, but often the change can come without the understanding. Sometimes the change just comes. And what I was sharing in the first week was that sometimes when you do things over and over again, you're not aware of the way you yourself are causing suffering. So I can give you an example. A friend of mine was on the last retreat I went to in April. And he has Lyme disease, and he has a lot of pain, and especially when he wakes up in the morning, he has a lot of pain. So every morning he wakes up, and he curses the morning, and he's grumpy, and he's like, God damn those bells, why can't they let us sleep till at least 6? A reasonable hour, they go off at 5. So he's like, just miserable. And he's doing that whole internal monologue while he's laying in bed, cursing the world, cursing himself, cursing his body, cursing the morning, cursing life. But he's meditating, and he's becoming more and more mindful and more mindful. And about halfway into the retreat, he woke up and started the same story, and he suddenly realized, because his mindfulness was present, he realized his story was creating a lot of suffering. Like all that aggravation, all that irritation, all that annoyance was optional. The pain was going to be there. The tiredness and not wanting to wake up in the morning was going to be there. But all the bitterness and all the angriness, that was optional. And he saw that and he was like, oh, wow. So he realized what was happening and the way that he was causing himself suffering. And that was it. He let it go. The next morning he woke up and it just didn't happen. He didn't try to make it not happen. That was insight. So a lot of times when you recognize the reason, or at least have an understanding about the things that you're doing, usually mental things, that are creating your suffering, insight takes hold and change happens without your trying. Because wisdom says, oh, this isn't working for me. Let me go around the hole. But it wasn't until she said, oh, this is my fault, until she realized, I'm making myself fall in this hole because I'm seeing it and I'm stepping in it anyway, that she was able to say, eyes wide open, I see the hole, I'm choosing another path, I'm going around it. You know, like people who have the same relationship over and over again. Everyone they date is the same person, and everyone makes them miserable. And finally, after the 10th person like that, they realize, okay, this is why I'm miserable in these relationships. I keep dating the same person with a different face. And the next time they meet that person, they may feel the habit of attraction, and then they'll say, I know you. You cause me grief. And they go around the hole. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. My
Okay.
second part was
Yeah.
if the woman chose another option and said, you know, I see the hole, I know it's there, but I'm going to master this, and I'm going to get across, and keeps falling in the hole like 3 times. Is that mindfulness still, that she's aware that...
It depends. You know, there could be ignorance. There could be ignorance if the hole is one that's huge, and she thinks she's going to jump over it, and she's determined to not walk around the hole, so she decides to jump over it and she falls in. And then the next time she decides to jump over it and she falls in. And then she decides to jump over it and she falls in. That's ignorance bordering on stupidity. You know? But if she brings some planks with her and she lays them down, but the planks aren't sturdy enough, so she falls. So next time she brings 2 planks and they still fall. But she's learning and she's paying attention and she's seeing each time what the problem is and why she's still falling in the hole, and makes adjustments according to what she's observing. Yeah, she's learning to master the hole. And at some point, if no matter what she does, she still falls in the hole, she has to say, okay, this hole needs to be walked around. Sometimes the best way to master something is to walk away from it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I would particularly like questions from those who are new. If you have any questions about what we've already done in that meditation, because, you know, I was being glib in the beginning, but we did spend the whole first class just focusing on the sound bit. And we talked about other stuff too. We mostly talked, yeah. But the first class, the only meditation we got to was sound. And then the second class, we added breath and we added sensation. So now we're throwing it all at you at once. How is that for you guys? Yeah.
Am I allowed to switch positions if I get uncomfortable?
That's a good question.
Because you say sensation, and I'm like, the sensation's kind of uncomfortable.
Right. Ultimately, not today. It's your first time, right?
Yeah.
So ultimately, you want to practice not changing positions. Ultimately, you want to be able to recognize an uncomfortable sensation as an uncomfortable sensation. And we're going to talk more about that next week. So for now, you're off the hook.
I had dislocated kneecap, and I was like, this is kind
Yeah.
of painful.
Okay, so that is definitely always something you want to tend to. If it's uncomfortable and it's just like, oh, this isn't that pleasant, I'd rather move and get to something that feels
Can I lay
better.
down for the next one?
What's that?
Can I lay down for the next one?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you.
Or sit in a chair. You can sit in a chair right now, actually.
This is
If
a
you,
really nice rug.
it is.
Hey, he's a whole candidate.
Yeah,
Mindful of the rug.
yeah. We'll get to that next week, too. But, you know, always pay attention to sensations that are indicating not safe. So if there's pain in the knee and the knee is injured, you move. But if your leg is falling asleep, sometimes you sit through that. I mean, that's maybe a more advanced practice. I'm not saying you should do that today. But, you know, I've meditated once for 2 hours with my feet asleep. And after a while, it just stopped bothering me. But usually, when my feet fall asleep, it hurts a lot and I change.
Okay. Okay.
You know, everybody has their threshold of what they can tolerate. And a sore knee is definitely not something you should tolerate. So
And I
thanks.
bet you knew when you were ready, right? You knew when you were ready to tolerate that.
I was on retreat, and so I had a lot of mindfulness. And, you know, otherwise, I'd never be able to, yeah. I can sit for maybe 20 minutes with my feet asleep at most. And then I feel like I'm going crazy. Yeah.
Excuse me. Were you able to meditate during that 2 hours?
Yeah, I was meditating. If I wasn't meditating, I would not have been able to sit there like that. Yeah, but because I was meditating, my mind was pretty peaceful and I was aware of the sensation, but I didn't feel the need to fix it. It was just, I was aware of it. And it was uncomfortable, but it was okay. And that's one of the things that meditation practice does help to cultivate, which is a certain amount of tolerance for things that are unpleasant. And face it, you know, life has a lot of unpleasantness in it. Really, I mean, the dog barks next door when you're trying to sleep. You know, when you're meditating, the person next to you is breathing too loud. The traffic is too slow and you're in a hurry. The line waiting for food is too long. I mean, there's so many really, really minor things out in the world that are unpleasant. And if you let yourself get stressed over all of them, you're going to walk around with adrenal glands that are, you know, fried. Yeah.
In the last meditation session, you know, a child voice is a beautiful, angelic child voice, you know, reading, and you know, it's just like music to my ear. And then I projected. I say, I think in my head, what if that's you know someone arguing, someone cursing, or you know like all this thing, you know, how will I feel about it? And I project, you know, like accept it, and the more I feel so relaxing, you know, just you know, project it in the, you know, not trying to fight it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think because the word will be there, you know.
Yeah.
Not, you know, we don't have the luxury to go hide under the Bodhi tree somewhere, you know. You know.
Yeah.
But so that was really good session.
I like that. The world will be there. Jane?
With practice, will I get good at not falling asleep? And what can I do to prevent that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that because it came up last week and it was pointed out to me that I didn't really address it adequately. So I'm glad it's coming up again. I don't know if practice will make it easier for you to not fall asleep. I think sleep will make it easier for you to not fall asleep. But if you're falling asleep in meditation, there are a few tricks. The one that I like the best for me, if I'm sitting, normally my hands are here, I'm relaxed. I put my hands up here. It works for me. And then if you start to fall asleep, you immediately catch it. So that's a pretty good one. Another one is to stand. Another one is...
There too.
Oh my goodness. Then the fall will be a lot harder. Another one is to open your eyes.
Okay.
And when you open your eyes, just gaze down. You don't have to drop your head. You don't have, just take your gaze down. Focus on one spot.
Okay.
Try not to let visual distractions, call you away. And once you get more experience, something that you can do, if you start to see that sleep is a habit that happens all the time when you meditate, you might want to investigate it to try to gain some understanding about why sleepiness is arising. And so you can start to investigate how it feels to be sleepy. Sometimes, I know for me, I don't tend to fall asleep a lot when I'm sitting on retreat. But once I did, and I really was paying attention to sleepiness. And that was the object of my meditation, was the feeling of sleepiness. And I noticed it was quite pleasant. So we often think of sleepiness as unpleasant because it's something unwanted. It's the not wanting. Remember, like we talked about before, not wanting something always has an unpleasant quality to it. It always creates suffering. So if you want not to be sleepy and sleepiness is there, then you feel irritated that sleepiness is there. But if you can peel that away and just examine the feeling of sleepiness, I at least found it to be quite pleasant, like a dreamlike state. It was delightful. And so you might notice that there's some unconscious thing that wants to go into sleepiness because it wants that pleasantness. And then if you notice that and notice that, then the unconscious moves into the conscious, and then it can't trick you anymore. And then again, like the story with my friend, it might go away. Once something becomes known, sometimes it only takes once, and then it's done. Sometimes I have a teacher that said, if you notice it and it doesn't go away, it's because you haven't fully understood it yet. But once you fully understand something, then there's no reason for it to be there anymore, and it's gone. So if you're interested in investigating sleepiness, but if you want the more practical thing, stand up, put your hands on your head, or open your eyes.
I was actually thinking about that issue last week, because I don't tend to get sleepy, but I know a lot of people do, and I thought, well, maybe it's because we spend our entire day, most of the time, with an external focus, and the only time we're inside is when we lay down and go to sleep. So it's just maybe habit.
Yeah.
If we can do things during the day to go inside our bodies for a minute, then that would be habit.
Yeah.
And then maybe we wouldn't get to sleep.
Yeah. You want to teach? That's great. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, I noticed that, now that you say that I realized that because I'm a very outward person, thinking about a lot of things, just because of the work I do. I'm like a problem solver person. I do project design now, so I'm like having to figure out, like, we have to do this, we gotta do this, now we gotta do that. So when I sit like this, or even at home, and I just sit down, or it's even like, or going to a play, or